Good evening. Today is the first Sunday of Advent, and as it's the first Sunday of Advent, it's important for us to begin the new year with some reflection and meditation, thoughts of how to turn this time, these next 4 weeks, into something very special, something that matters to you in preparation for Christmas. In a lot of ways, it's like giving yourself a Christmas present, and a spiritual Christmas present. I've thought about this for a number of weeks and thought to myself that maybe I'd just do some reflections on Scripture leading up to Christmas, as I ordinarily have done in the past, but turning to today, which is looking toward end times and our look to the coming of the kingdom, the second coming, where the Lord comes to be our judge. And of course, next week we look at John the Baptist, as we do the week after as well. More Isaiah next week, and that servant ministry that looks toward John the Baptist, the voice crying out in the wilderness and making the path straight for the Lord. The third week being Gaudete Sunday, the joyful Sunday, the happy Sunday, the rose-colored Sunday, where we turn once again to John the Baptist, not Mary, as many think, and we look at his understanding of his own ministry as being one where he doesn't feel worthy to tie up the thong of Jesus' sandals. And then the fourth week of Advent, turning to Mary, looking at the joyful celebration that comes with the angel's visit, the message, and that reflection that Mary has. And the joyful and yet extremely political, in a lot of ways, socialist overturning of a capitalist kind of monopoly, and an understanding of the wealthy being so much in power that there's no voice to those who are marginalized, and who have no voice. And that's normally how I turn to this period of time of Advent and the Bible studies or studies that I've looked at in the past. I think this year we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to turn to PWRDF, Primates World Relief and Development Fund. And here in Canada, the Primates World Relief and Development Fund is very much a proactive, emergency needs funding project, or many projects, of course, but it's also, for us, provides awareness, and a greater awareness, not particularly our home needs, but the needs of the world, the needs of the global community, a community that is much closer than it was when I finished seminary 21 years ago. And as we all know, the internet has brought us very, very close together. Last week, I downloaded an app for my phone that a friend had made me aware of, and I think, here it is, it's Radio Garden. It's like Google Earth, you know how you pan in and all of a sudden you get the globe and it moves around as you swipe. Well, this does exactly the same thing, but with radio stations. My kids, and even myself, I must confess, spend most of our time listening to either Apple Music and Spotify. And so the music that I generally listen to is music that I grew up with in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and not a lot of new stuff. But in those days, radio was really important, and radio is the voice of, and continues to be the voice of small communities. And as soon as I downloaded this product, I went to Blanc Sablon, the local radio station for that part of the coast of Quebec, the farthest point out. And if you imagine Newfoundland like this, this being the Long Range Mountains and Corner Brook and St. Anthony with St. John on this side, we were on the Quebec side of that Labrador Strait, and that's where Blanc Sablon is. And so I listened to the radio station there, and it just brought me back to my first ministry and the importance of that voice and that connection that they had listening to the radio station and the concerns of that particular little region. And as I looked around, I went to places that I thought would be interesting, like Ibiza, to listen to house music, and to the Caribbean. Of course, it was cold that day, and I wanted to warm up. And in this, we see that all these little lights of radio stations around the globe are voices not only of big corporations who own radio stations all over, but really it's the voices that are being heard, many in Africa, in South America, in places that need a voice, around Tibet, and places of conflict in Timor, East Timor, all around the world. We're so small now. I can turn this on and very easily listen to whatever station. Obviously, I don't want to get into a copyright problem, so I'll turn off my sound. But, just look. And I don't get paid for this app, but if you look, you just focus in, and where are we now? We're in Nizhny Novgorod in Russia. And then we go down, and here we are in Kano, Nigeria. It's amazing. I mean, I can listen to radio stations from Accra in Ghana, not that far from Ho. And I bet, I haven't done this yet, so this is kind of interesting. I probably could find a station. Here's Korforidua in Ghana. Our how would I put it? Our sponsorship place, Bishop McAllister School in is in Uganda. I mean, that's another place that we can go to. Here is the Diocese of Ho in Ghana, and Bishop Matthias and his work there that we've been praying for well over 10 years, if not longer. It's wonderful to be able to do this. We're a global community. So I thought, starting off today, what we do is we'd use the PWRDF program that is being promoted by our national church on reflection and moving forward. And so I received an email not that long ago, I guess it was last week, speaking about the thread of hope, the Advent resources provided by the Anglican Church of Canada. And I thought to myself, this would be really good because it's about looking at the global realities, especially during COVID, and giving people voice when so many voices are being limited and taken away. And I am a very strong proponent of listening to people. I very much believe in the Indigenous understanding of the circle and of the African Ubuntu, listening, loving, uplifting, and supporting, and giving voice to those who need to be heard. And I think that this might help us. So today, we're going to look at week 1, spreading the good news. It's a reflection provided by Lorenzo Vargas. He's the program manager for communications for social change with the PWRDF, partnered with the World Association for Christian Communication. That's WACC. He's a Colombian Canadian, and he holds degrees in international development and communication from York University and McGill, and is pursuing a PhD in communications and culture at a wonderful communications university, Ryerson, here in Canada. He starts us off by asking us to read Luke 1:26 to 28, and I'll say this about that passage. During Elizabeth's 6 months of pregnancy, God sent the angel Gabriel to a virgin who lived in Nazareth, a town in Galilee. She was engaged to marry a man named Joseph, from the family of David. Her name was Mary. The angel came to her and said, "Greetings, the Lord has blessed you and is with you." Lorenzo states this: many of us live in societies where there seems to be more communication than ever. Email, social media, messaging, smartphones, and ever-increasing digital information capabilities, as those I just spoke about. But real communication, which is essential to people's dignity and community, is consistently under threat. All people require unfettered access to the information and knowledge essential to democracy, empowerment, responsible citizenship, and mutual accountability. Everyone must be able to engage in transparent, informed, and democratic debate. But in all societies, communication is stifled by these. Vulnerable and marginalized communities are denied access to information and communication. Media monopolies that prevent a diversity of perspective and opinion. Censorship or deliberate misinformation. Misrepresentation or lack of representation of groups or communities in the news. Imposition of language and restrictions on the use of Indigenous languages. He goes on to state that in this context, the WACC, the World Association for Christian Communication, works with all those denied the right to communicate because of status, identity, or gender. The WACC advocates for full access to information and communication, promotes open and diverse media, and strengthens networks of communication to advance peace, understanding, and justice. Peace, understanding, and justice. Those are our hopes today on this Sunday of hope. And we persevere, trying as a church to speak on behalf of those who have no voice and to focus on their needs and not the needs of the corporate, the needs of those who oppress, the needs of those who deny. When we look at these stifled communications, such as vulnerable and marginalized communities denied access to information and communication, I'm a very strong proponent of the internet. I believe that it has great potential, and I still speak of it as potential because I don't think we're there yet. It's very, very new. That all people should have access because it's the world's library. We must see it in that context. Now, it has vulnerabilities. Everything relies on power, and that electricity, coal, nuclear, whatever is used for power, water, hydro, of course, is, gears all this stuff up. Without that, we have nothing. People who live in poverty don't have easy access to those type of necessities that we take for granted in the kind of Western world, as it were, or the first world, if you want to call it that. We take energy and power for granted when there are a lot of people. Sorry, my dog is playing with a bone. We have a lot of people in our world who do not have the same level of access to electricity and to that type of utility. My first gut reaction would be to argue on behalf of the internet and say everybody must have the internet. But you got to have power, electricity, to use the internet. And so we as a church, when we provide the means for communities to have access to what we consider a fundamental right, that's imperative. The PWRDF and other agencies that are assisting communities that do not have easy access to the very, very fundamentals, that's so important of a mission. That brings hope. And that brings potential to be able to access the internet. The internet is absolutely a wonderful thing when used appropriately, and like everything in this world, we as human beings have a propensity to sin. And that essentially means that we're almost geared towards it. We want to be selfish. We willfully do the things that we know in our hearts that we shouldn't do, but yet we fight against that. I deserve it. I've earned it. It's mine. I reflect on thou shalt not covet. But then there's the realities. It's not coveting your neighbor's electricity when you have none, or coveting your neighbor's internet access because you have none. You probably are aware that I fought to get the best internet that we can here on the peninsula where we live. We're a rural community with internet, absolutely. And there are times when that internet access is not great. But it's nothing in comparison to not having access at all, not being able to hear the news, to get access. Radio stations are so imperative because they can be heard with a radio. You can have batteries and a transistor radio, the good old days, and still have access to some of these. But as we move along, we know that only certain voices are heard by certain media companies that take over. The internet provides access to so many different voices. And then it's up to us to be educated, to be able to discern what is fake news and what is real, what is false and what is true. Some places like Facebook, YouTube, other big conglomerates like Google and, of course, and Apple, Microsoft. Everybody's trying to limit voices, increase privacy, worrying about groups and misinformation. And that's all well and good until they start stifling the voices of those crying out in the wilderness. Communities that are marginalized and vulnerable, who are denied access to information and communication, must have ombudspeople and advocates on their side. And that's what I believe the WACC and the PWRDF are trying to provide here in this study that they've offered us. We have mentioned it, that media monopolies preventing a diversity of perspective and opinion are troublesome and fuel that vulnerability and the marginalization of those who are not able to have access. And I worry, and I think a lot of Christians worry, that those who are in a position of controlling communications have the power to deny freedom of speech and expression. Look at China. Accessing Google is extremely troublesome in China. And yes, it's politically motivated. We understand that. But we understand it from our side. We don't understand it from their side. Nevertheless, people should have access to learn. And either politics or corporate greed or corporate control wants to minimize criticism to the point of denying rights and eventually political imprisonment and, dare I say, atrocities. Censorship or debate or deliberate misinformation happens in countries that do not have the same level of openness that we do here in Canada. We know from 5 or 6 years ago that even the self-proclaimed leaders of the world have quite a hard time distinguishing between truth and lies because of the media and the influence the media has. When a particular media company decides to only speak one voice, then there's no communication and there's no chance of criticism or critical debate. We need to look at places in the world that are vulnerable to those type of situations, especially in what we very sadly call third world countries. You may have seen that the Omicron virus or variation has erupted in certain places in southern Africa. And now borders are being closed and flights are being canceled, and these are the type of situations where often we're harming the people in this situation, and yet it's COVID times, and so we don't want this to spread, and yet we think of it as a third world issue. And I remember back, a year ago, the Indian variation, the Chinese COVID, the African COVID. We were so busy in the first world blaming others, because once again our media spins the tale so that it's us and them, the poor and insignificant, pushing them aside and not embracing and trying to help and assist. At least not as much as we should do. Deliberate misinformation. We've seen it here in North America. We've lived it. Dare I say, we continue to live it. What do? We continue to inform and try to keep ourselves educated with the best possible knowledge we can. And where do you turn? I turn to a number of news sites that I try to trust, but there's always that sneaking suspicion on the back of my mind. To what level do I trust? And I keep on reading different articles from different places, from around the world, not just here in North America, to try to keep myself open to diverse voices. And I've just said over the past couple of months, we need to listen to those who are anti-vaxxers. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but we need to listen to one another. And when there is a denial of information and a denial of listening, that's time to move on. But we must understand the fears, concerns, even the outlandish presumptions, possibly out of ignorance, but we still need to give a chance to listen, to better understand the situation. I don't think that we do a good enough job doing that. And I think here Lorenzo is encouraging us as a Christian community to continue to understand that communication is central. And in order to get that communication, people also need the very basics of life that we take for granted. 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, we were trying to raise money in different parishes that I was part of for better water access. Water. We are aware of things that we never really fully understood before, all because of the internet. And it gives us a better opportunity to assist and help in direct ways instead of just broad strokes. He goes on to speak of misrepresentations or a lack of representation of groups or communities in the news. Here in New Brunswick, we absolutely need to better understand the Indigenous peoples and understand why there is a fear within the community, an anger within the community, and the frustration which they feel. The same as within the Francophone community here in New Brunswick. Being a native Montrealer and being an Anglophone, during the time of the FLQ crisis and and Bill 022 and Bill 101 and the language laws that ensued, I know what it's like to have a marginalized voice. And with that said, we had lots of advocates. I chose to move. I was not forced to move. And there are still many, many English language rights groups that continue to prevail in Quebec and fight for rights. And trying to understand from a minority perspective, as an Anglophone in Quebec, the Francophone fears of losing the language in the midst of a North American context where everything is English. The music in the elevators, everything. Not that long ago, the political government in Quebec wanted to, and I believe that it went through, promote Francophone music out of Quebec in governmental buildings so that there was no English music. At first hearing that, oh, your hair should stand up on the back of your neck. And yet, I think that there was an interesting debate and discussion that the Anglophone should have, looking at this very small community in North America that has absolutely a distinct part of their society, or a distinct part of North America, that in many ways they need to be heard and understood. We're always going to have political disagreements. We're always going to have disagreements. We're never going to find this true understanding where all of us agree. We're always going to have disagreements. And as a matter of course, if you have gone to marriage counseling, or you're part of marriage counseling, you will know about Gottman and the work that he does with statistics on marriage. And it's something like 65 or between 60 and 70% of couples have issues that will never be solved. Impossible to solve. And the work that he does in marriage counseling is listening to one another. That's central. It's central to us listening to the marginalized, to those who, even here in New Brunswick, we listen to the Indigenous voices, we listen to the Francophone voices. I believe, and I'm a foreigner here in New Brunswick. I will always be a foreigner in New Brunswick. And I've been here 17 years. There's a great divide between West and East. A great divide, North and South. And I pray that we work harder as a Christian community to break down those barriers and to truly understand. One of the most seminal moments in my academic career was going to a very simple summer class on Indigenous spirituality, focusing particularly on the Mohawk and Iroquois, because it was in the context of Quebec. I opened my eyes in a way that I never thought possible at the time. And it helped me to see Scripture more clearly because of the importance of listening to one another and of communication. And recently I've been on a big communication kick. We listen and we have to be proactive in our reflection. We must listen, learn, maybe even be silent. There was another university class, and I may have mentioned it before, and it's a class that I took. I was in CEGEP, so let's say grade 12. And it was at McGill. and our CJEP class went to McGill. I went to a very small CJEP. It's kind of like a preparatory school for university in Quebec. It's the equivalent of grade 12 and 13, and then in Quebec you only spend 3 years at university. And so in that, we went to this lecture. And the lecture at McGill was a feminist speaking about feminist rights, and she would not allow any men to speak. And she was very hardcore and quite offensive, as I recall. But it taught me that marginalized voices need to be listened to. I didn't agree with her methodology, but I understand it. I still don't agree 100%, but I'm learning that maybe sometimes the privileged, like the males, needed to just shut up and maybe be forced to shut up and listen. Because for so long, women, not only at that time but now, have been marginalized so that their voice has not been heard. So was she wrong in denying any male asking a question? Probably not. Not in the context of what she was trying to proclaim in her lecture. She made a statement. It was bold and it was offensive. But I can understand it. Maybe that's the way you feel about the Francophone or the Indigenous communities. And I would say that it's vice versa as well. We all need to listen to each other and not deny that representation or be fooled into misrepresentation. Remember, media agencies want one thing: advertisement revenue. And the only way that they can get advertisement revenue is by you clicking or watching. And those advertisers want a certain politic to be proclaimed. And they have editorials written particularly for a particular purpose. And we have to be aware of that, always when we're listening to the news. Whether it's CTV or CBC, and I mean CBC, remember, depends on advertisements. We're not like the BBC. They depend on advertisements. And whenever you have somebody else paying money for a service, they have power and influence. So when Lorenzo Vargas, the program manager for communication for social change with the PWRDF, states that we need to be aware of the misrepresentation or lack of representation of groups or communities in the news, it's relevant here as much as it's relevant in Zimbabwe or Togo or Benin or Venezuela or Chile. No matter where you are or where you find yourself, money changes hands with agreements. And sometimes those agreements are ensuring that critical voices do not get heard. Imposition of language and restrictions on the use of Indigenous languages. Sometimes we have a hard enough time just getting easy access to French here in southwestern New Brunswick. I'm a foreigner. And if I were Francophone, and I've been an Anglophone in Sept-Îles when my daughter Pippa was born, where access to English was almost impossible. I know what it's like to be on the other side. It is very frustrating. It's very difficult. I was able to function in Sept-Îles because of very elementary French. But if you have nothing and you're older and you're in distress, or you need assistance, it's imperative. And we are the only bilingual province. And a lot of people are angry about that. And personally, I don't think that that's something to be angry about, because we're providing open ears to a community that has been marginalized, kicked out, as a matter of fact, a few centuries ago. Should we continue to live in guilt? No, but we should be aware. When the angel Gabriel visited Mary, greetings, favored one, blessed are you. Blessed are you. You're going to bear a son, and he shall be Emmanuel, God with us. And Mary listened because she pondered all these things in her heart. That's what Advent is about. Pondering, thinking, and being hopeful. So, to wrap up, as you approach Advent and the weeks and the days that progress, first, I ask you to go to the National Church's website, and I'll just bring that up, anglican.ca. If you don't know it, anglican.ca. It's very easy, and here we go. I love showing off the iPad. And you'll see reconciliation and healing is the first thing on our page. Some of you may never have been there before. And of course, we have Churches Beyond Borders looking at our relationship with the Anglican Communion, the Evangelical Church, Lutheran Church in Canada, who we're partnered with, and together as church, as one. We are in communion together. And the Episcopal Church in the United States. And here is Share Every Spark, Surprised by the Spirit. There's so much here on this page. But I draw your attention to the other page, which is the WACC page, which we've been speaking of, enabling people to be seen and heard. And it's very nice. It slides up, and you can see the news. There are COVID communications, and there's a number of issues that you can investigate to learn more. Communication makes all rights possible. And remember, this is about human rights. Communication makes development possible. There is a Center for Communication Rights, and we see here two Muslim ladies engaged in discourse. This is an issue of faith for all people of the world. And we as Christians, I pray, advocate on behalf of all people, not just Christians, that we are trying to better the world by opening up communication. I want to have dialogue with my Muslim, my Hindu, my Jewish, my atheist, my agnostic, all people I want to engage with to better understand where they're coming from. And God willing, those encounters will change me forever so that I'm a better person and more the person that God wants me to be. Because when I shut down communication, I believe I'm shutting down the Lord's voice. My mom always told me that her mother, who I had never met, had said, Always welcome the stranger at your door, because it might be Christ in your midst. I'm not sure if that's common wisdom, it's something that people say, but it really struck me. And it made a very great impact on my life. Because whenever I encounter anyone, I try to see God within them. We need to do the same. There's news, there's regional networks, there's getting involved, and there's resources. And so that is very easy to find that website. It's waccglobal.org. And so I commend that to your reading. Not much scripture today, but enough. The angel Gabriel visiting Mary, opening up communication and dialogue. I don't think many of us would shut down an angel in our midst. Mary certainly didn't, but she pondered everything in her heart. If communities who are marginalized and oppressed do not even have the opportunity for angels to be in their midst, how can they hear any good news? And I'm not talking about gospel good news in the traditional sense, but of good news from God in the midst of them, from people listening and caring. We can disagree, but we need to ponder a lot more. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I thank you for this time today on the first Sunday of Advent. I pray that as these weeks go on, that you'll give us more insight into the needs of our world. I pray, Heavenly Father, that each of those who have watched throughout this video will be blessed with the gift of pondering, with the gift of listening, and with the gift of hope and the encouragement to further educate on these issues. And this I pray in the name of Christ. Amen. So bless you. You will see, if you subscribe to the email, the weekly emails that come from the PWRDF, that there's a meditation from the rector of the Anglican Church of St. Paul's in Niagara, in Caledonia, in the Diocese of Niagara. And so that's Reverend Cheryl Barker. And she has some questions. And so I'm going to encourage you to look that up and meditate with her. Tomorrow we'll have our meditation time, tomorrow evening, and that will be not broadcast live, it will be an upload for you tomorrow in the way that we've been doing meditations in the past. So I bid you peace and every blessing of this time and this evening. God bless you all. Have a wonderful, thoughtful, and reflective Advent.